NBC Sports Prudential Update. Now, Ahmad Rashad.
And we welcome you to our Prudential Update studio in New York. We will get you back to the NHRA U.S. Nationals in a moment. But first, an update of the early finals from college football's top 25. Starting in Happy Valley, where 6th-ranked Penn State was happy to host Big Ten opponent Iowa. The fans at Beaver Stadium renaming University Park Joe, Pennsylvania. It was no contest. Tailback Mike Archie scoring 3 times in the first 16 minutes. This 35-yard run giving the Nittany Lions a 14-0 lead. Penn State with 35 first-quarter points rolled all over Iowa at 61-21. Auburn's defense was the difference. They intercepted Jamie Howard 6 times, including this one by Brian Robinson, who brings it back 41 yards for the go-ahead score with under 2 minutes remaining. Auburn's D accounted for 4 touchdowns. LSU was driving for the potential game-winning touchdown in the final seconds. Chris Schelling with the interception in the end zone to preserve the win. Auburn extends their win streak to 14 with a 30-26 win. In Chapel Hill, North Carolina returned 2 interceptions for touchdowns as the 16th-ranked Tar Heels cruised to a 49-0 win over Tulane. The Boston College Eagles were grounded today as Virginia Tech dominated a defensive struggle. Scott Mutrin's pass off the hands of Greg Grice was picked off by Torian Gray, who returned it 66 yards for the score. The point after was no good. Tech led 9-0 on the way to a 12-7 win. By the way, BC's 3 quarterbacks were intercepted 4 times. John Cooper's Ohio State Buckeyes have now won 16 straight home openers. Bobby Hoying passed for 217 yards and 2 touchdowns, including this 43-yard strike to Chris Sanders. That made the score 24-3 Ohio State. 27-3 was the final. 2 other notes from the NBA. High-scoring shooting guard Ron Harper, rumored to be heading to New York, has signed with the Chicago Bulls. And Phoenix added more offensive firepower when they signed forward Wayman Tisdale. The NBA also approved Danny Manning's 1-year contract, also with the Phoenix Suns. A reminder, tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern, join Greg Gumbel and me, along with our 2 Super Bowl winning coaches, Mike Ditka and Joe Gibbs, for NFL Live. We'll set the day in football. Then stay tuned for one of these games, including the Jets at Miami. That is all from the Prudential Update. Time now to send you back to the NHRA U.S. Nationals.
We're back at Indianapolis Raceway Park. It's time now for semifinal action in the top fuel category. And I guess if there is an upside to the rain delay we experienced today, is we'll get to see these 6,000 horsepower machines run in the darkness.
It is an historic first for the U.S. Nationals. You know, I've been thinking about this. Connie Coletta against Kenny Bernstein. As it gets later, the dew-point drops. The driver, well, he's competing against the other driver. The crew chief, Dale Armstrong, Tim Richards, they've got to race this track. Forget the other car. How much will this track take? And here's 2 guys very good at it. Dale looks over at Tim Richards to see what he's doing with his machine. They both start to bring him forward. Your only enemy here is the racetrack, more so than the other driver.
It's been a disappointing season for Kenny Bernstein. He's only been to 1 final where he lost at Sonoma. Connie Coletta has 2 wins this year, looking for number 3 here.
A lot of raw fuel out of the pipe. That's a normal situation. Coletta the last to stage. And Bernstein loses traction in the first 30 feet. Connie Coletta spewing a little oil, but he still gets there first. He's got a lot of motors, trust me. 4.84 seconds at 293 miles an hour. Kenny Bernstein, his only win there was off the starting line by 200 per second.
There is Eddie Hill. He will be squaring off against Pat Austin in the other semifinal round. You're on board now. You'll be getting a great view from Eddie Hill's car. That's the rear wing where the camera is mounted.
Interesting. These are temporary lights. They were brought in for just a Friday night qualifying session, something special for the fans. Little did we know how badly they would be needed.
Pat Austin in the far lane, the defending champion here at the U.S. Nationals, has really been struggling. They've lost in the first round in 5 of their last 6 races. And now he'll be racing Eddie Hill with a chance to move on to the finals.
For Pat Austin, this is a bit of a Hail Mary. You know, earlier, Frank Hawley had a chance to take a look backwards, an Indy moment involving Eddie Hill.
1961 was the first year that the U.S. Nationals were held in Indianapolis, Indiana. And dragster driver Eddie Hill was there. He had a car that looked a lot different than the one he has now. It had 2 Pontiac engines in it and 4 rear drag slicks. Well, those skinny little tires caused a problem on the start line because when he took off, they literally ripped the asphalt from the ground. NHRA Chief Starter Buster Couch said, Eddie, you can't wreck our drag strip. We've got a big race to run. When you come back up for your next run, please drive to the outside where you're not going to wreck the racetrack for everyone else.
Well, Eddie Hill can now drive anywhere he wants to with the beautiful Pennzoil top fueler. Hill knocked off Shelly Anderson and Scott Coletta to get to the semifinals. Pat Austin beat Blaine Johnson and Michael Brotherton to get to this point.
Eddie Hill in the near lane. Changes the fuel mixture. They do it manually in the cockpit. Look at this. You're going for a ride on a rocket ship, folks. It's Eddie Hill all the way as Pat Austin overpowers the racetrack. Eddie Hill backs it down. Very intelligent. 5.02, 280 miles an hour.
So here's a look at the final pairing in top fuel, and look at this. Connie Coletta against Eddie Hill. Coletta has lane choice. Neither one of these drivers has ever won the U.S. Nationals. That will certainly change. And here's the senior citizen of that matchup, 58-year-old Eddie Hill, absolutely ecstatic to be in the final with a chance for his first win at Indianapolis.
I don't know if it was intentional or not, but not overpowering this racetrack was the smartest thing a man could do right now.
Well, I tell you what, we missed it a little bit. Something really strange happened up there early, but we somehow got through it.
Like what?
Well, it felt like it broke loose and like I pedaled it and saved it, or it shook and maybe drove through it or something. There's something pretty weird, but then it did pretty good later on. We were lucky. Thanks, boss.
Is this a season saver for Eddie Hill right here?
Oh, it feels so good. Yeah, really, this goes a long, long way towards salvaging an otherwise pretty dismal season for us.
There's a lot of racing left here at Indianapolis Raceway Park. We'll come back with the final four in the funny cars after this. Brian Hammond, Steve Evans, Frank Hawley back with you at Indianapolis Raceway Park. It's time for the semifinal round of the funny cars. And our first matchup has Casey Spurlock against Chuck Etchels. Spurlock has lane choice, and unlike most drivers with lane choice, has chosen the right lane.
I wonder if he watched the previous round in top fuel. With Kenny Bernstein smoked the tires over there, Pat Austin had problems. But if you're comfortable with a lane and your car is set up for that lane, don't tempt fate. You're riding with Chuck Etchels, and you both lose. There goes Spurlock, streaking away from a broken Chuck Etchels to a 5.19 second elapsed time. A good speed, 292 miles an hour, but he was sound asleep off the starting line. It's a good thing Etchels had more problems than Spurlock did.
There's the car of Kenji Okazaki getting the spark put to it. It is now underway. He'll be facing Cruz Pedregon in his semifinal matchup. Of course, Okazaki familiar with being where he is. He was there last year, went to the final round, and there's Cruz Pedregon, also very familiar with his spot. He won this race back in 1992. Interesting story here. The owner of Okazaki's car, Jim Dunn, helped the McDonald's crew earlier this year. The McDonald's team was really, really struggling. Dunn went over, showed him a few things, got him back on track, and now he's going to meet him here in the semifinals of the U.S. Nationals. And the winner of this race will advance on to the finals, where they will meet Casey Spurlock, who is a very happy young man at the far end with Steve Evans.
What do we think of this brand new race car?
Oh, Steve, isn't this a great race car? To come out here to the U.S. Nationals, biggest race of the year, with a brand new race car that was just literally finished hours before we ran it the first time. Got to give a lot of credit to this crew, and you know all of these guys, and they've really worked hard. Ronnie Swearingen, Corey Lee, and I've got to say just a little personal statement here. When I was a kid growing up, I used to watch the U.S. Nationals on TV, and I got to tell you, I'm getting a little emotional. You know, this is a boyhood dream for me to be in the finals at the U.S. National, and you know, that's all I can say. It's very emotional for me.
I won't add a word to that, Brian.
You can hear in the voice of the drivers that are being interviewed by Steve just how big this race is, just how much it means to these competitors. Who will RSVP Spurlock? We're going to find out here shortly.
No driver other than a North American has ever won an NHRA national event title. Kenji Okazaki had a shot at it a year ago. Maybe he will again.
Okazaki is up in smoke. Cruz Pedregon cruises to the win. 530, 286.44 miles per hour. So Cruz Pedregon advances to the championship round of the funny cars, where he will take on Casey Spurlock. Spurlock has lane choice, and he may have to fight that emotion we heard him talk about earlier, because he's going to be facing a veteran, a guy who's been there in Cruz Pedregon, the 1992 champion. It's awfully busy down in the Eddie Hill pits. Here's Steve Evans.
A lot of air between the frame rails of Eddie Hill's car, but soon to be filled with what Eddie calls a new lump. I guess that's Texas for motor. Had a look at his computer. He said it was the strangest run he ever made in the semifinals. The car shook violently 0.8 seconds into the run, confused the clutch for 1.9 seconds. When it finally hooked up, it pulled the motor down and burned the main bearings. Now, they're also going to put a brand new differential in the car. It made a funny noise up the return road, and funny could be trouble going into the finals of the U.S. Nationals.
Now let's take our first look at the pro stock category, the third professional class in NHRA drag racing. You are riding with Darrell Alderman, the 1991 U.S. Nationals champion and the points leader, who was in a battle with his teammate Scott Jeffrey-On, followed by the Oldsmobile of Warren Johnson, the Pontiac of Jim Yates, and the Oldsmobile of Kurt Johnson. Earlier, Alderman squared off against Mark Powick in the semifinal round.
Alderman in the Dodge in the near lane, the Oldsmobile of Mark Powick. Alderman 2 weeks ago threw a race away, taking a starting line nap here at Indianapolis. It was the car that let him down. Something going wrong in the drivetrain of the clutch. Mark Powick sailed into his first ever U.S. Nationals final with a 717. Let's ride on board with Darrell Alderman. A replay of that incident. He almost got the Christmas tree, Brian.
Look how busy he gets when the rear end breaks away, sawing at the wheel, getting it pointed in the right direction. He does, but by that point, the race is gone. In the other semifinal, it was Warren Johnson against Indianapolis native Steve Schmidt.
Now watch the Oldsmobile of Johnson in the far lane. Look how long the front wheels were off the ground all the way through low and second gear. But it didn't matter. Johnson wins it by a nose. They both run identical 7.15 second elapsed time. I talked to Warren about that wheel stand.
Warren, a broken wheelie bar. This baby could have been a handful.
Oh, man, I feel like Bob Riggle in a wheel stander. All I saw was black sky and bats.
So Warren had an awful lot of work to do, but for Mark Powick, it was routine maintenance. We'll see the pro stock final when we return to Indianapolis Raceway Park.